we have some viewer mail.
We have viewer mail?
Yes, we do.
I like viewer mail. If you have questions, please send them to Doug@riskandrewardtv.org. I would be happy to answer your question. What do we have this week?
This is from Bruce in Orange County, and he writes, has undertaxing the wealthiest Americans proven successful to the economy?
Well, thank you for the question, Bruce. But I have to say, I picked this question because it's got a little bias in it.
Ah.
Can you see the bias? Yeah. Has undertaxing the wealthiest Americans. That kind of implies
they're
that,
assuming that,
that you know how much they should be taxed. You know exactly the right tax that they should be, and that they aren't paying it. You also have defined wealthiest Americans in some vague way that I don't quite understand. But more importantly, I'm not sure if we're talking about the same thing. Because, well, let's exclude the bias of how much we're taxing and not taxing.
Okay.
Because we don't know exactly what the right tax rate is. So undertaxing and overtaxing is a perception issue that we're not going to tackle
I agree with
here.
that.
But the question under taxing the wealthiest, when we do income tax in this country, we do it on income. And income and wealth are two different things. So you can be making $1 million a year and spending $2 million a year and be in debt $10 million, and you are not
You're not wealthy.
You're not wealthy. You're negative $10 million. So there's this old story about Donald Trump. He's walking down the street with one of his wives. Which wife? I have no idea. And there's a homeless man standing in the street, or sitting in the street, and he looks at the homeless man. He tells his wife, he goes, "Honey, that man has $1 billion more than me." And you're like, "Well, how can that be? You're Donald Trump. That doesn't make sense. You have these buildings and everything else." He goes, "Yes, but if you look at my balance sheet, I owe $1 billion more than I have. So I'm a negative billionaire."
Yes.
Yeah.
So that
he's
street
not only
person
not
with
wealthy,
nothing
he has nothing,
more.
has $1 billion more than Donald Trump does, and that's a true story, because he leveraged all this real estate. It went down. The banks let him go through and keep the cash flow going until the real estate market recovered. But at one point, he was negative $1 billion.
Thank goodness for that.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was a good business deal on his side. But remember that wealth and income are two different things. So when we're talking about income tax, it's based on income. And we do get taxed on capital gains, which you could say is kind of taxing the wealthy.
At a lower rate.
At a lower rate. But we tax them regardless of how much money you have. So the rate on capital gains doesn't depend on how many shares of stock or how many dividends you have. So we never say what's your assets minus your liabilities for your net worth, and here's your tax rate. We say how much money did you make, here's your tax rate. So we tax income, not wealth. And so there's a issue here that you're not clearly thinking through, or at least you aren't acknowledging it, because you're talking about taxing wealthy Americans versus taxing high-income Americans, and that's two different things. Okay, so keeping that straight. One other issue on this question I think is really important that most people don't get to is that the impact of taxes on the overall economy is much less than the political pundits would like you to believe. For example, they like to compare different presidents with different rates of growth in the economy, and they completely ignore things like, gee, while he was president, we invented the internet.
That helped out.
It's like, oh, we had this big internet boom. Well, I'm pretty sure that had an impact on the economy.
Or a world war.
Or a world war, or the end of a world war, or a oil shock, or all kinds of other things that have far bigger dramatic consequences to the economy than the difference between a 39 versus a 36% tax rate. It does have an impact, but it doesn't have an impact like these bigger events have. So when we think about taxing the wealthiest Americans and getting into political debates, it's very important that we think clearly through the questions. What we really need to get through all these tax issues and everything else, and I've told you this before, I don't know that I've ever put it on the show, is we need a next new big thing. That's really what will get us out of this. More than the jobs, the housing, construction,
a new power
everything.
source.
We need a next new big thing. Imagine if we had just now, given our financial situation, our fiscal situation, our economy, we just now were inventing the internet. If we just now were inventing the internet.
Oh, boom.
Boom. Boom. Everybody's working. Everybody's moving forward. I mean, when the internet started, it was like it's a land rush to get websites and computers and infrastructure and routers and servers and wire the country. We had to wire the country. We didn't have, DSL lines and cable modems and all that stuff. Well, we need that next new big thing. And when we get that, the economy will really take off. If we don't get that,
stagnation.
Sputter. I mean, we've got everything we want. New iPhone 4S isn't going to do it. iPad 3.
It's helping a little bit.
Yes, but it helps a little bit, like, the difference between a rotary phone and a push-button phone helps. The telephone helps. We had to put poles up, wires up, everything. New telephone would be good. No, we don't have that. So, getting back to Bruce's question, I know I didn't answer your question directly, and I kind of lectured you a little bit on the question itself. I didn't mean to do that, but remember that the political debate isn't doing anything other than trying to sell you on who to vote for. It's not really educating you on what's going on. So, we taxing the wealthy isn't what we're talking about. We're talking about high incomes, and there's a difference between wealth and income, and you don't really know what the correct level of taxes is, so saying it's under or over it is an opinion that, everybody's got one, right? So try to stay out of the bias in the questions, and try to think of what the next new big thing would be. I would love to figure
Start
it out.
inventing.
Yeah, invent something. In fact, that would be a great move for the economy, is to start trying to invent more things.
And what's your takeaway?
My takeaway is, approaching questions with a bias leads to mistakes. Better to think like a scientist with open questions without bias. You'll learn more and you'll make fewer mistakes.